Okay, folks, I have 1:15, so we are going to start with the share outs. And I'm going to ask Jim Palmieri and Paul Swighton if they could go ahead and share out. That is the health and safety team, a large team of at least 14 people. So go ahead, Jim, you should be able to unmute.
Yep. Thank you, Sue. So it was a great discussion, by the way. It was a lot of good ideas, a lot of problems with ideas, and so forth. So some of the greatest challenges that GCS will face, you know, a lot of the challenges, so we've already talked about in our meetings, but one thing that really stood out to me was, I think Dan said it. People come to work and they go home, and we don't know where these people go. Okay, not everybody goes home to their house and stays there till the next day, including the weekends. So how do we know they're coming back and they're not carrying the virus? So that poses a pretty big challenge for us, as far as safety and keeping people safe. The other challenge, same question, was how do we clean everything? How do we disinfect everything in pre-K, or lockers, and you know high school gym equipment, or elementary gym equipment, or anything anywhere, in the entire building every day. It's almost impossible. Um, so that's what we got from question one. Creative solutions. That was a tough one. Okay, so the only thing we really got with creative solutions was masks. There's really not much out there as far as what we can do, if we were to bring everybody back into this building. Okay, and that's really the only one that we did. Well, we did all three of them, but there really wasn't much on the remote or the combination, um, because it's just, I don't know, it's really the only solution that we can come up with. Paul, did you have anything with that one? All right. Well, let me say my third one. I'm going to send it over to Paul. Okay. And then the third one with the budgetary and the instructional, um, you know, we need to train staff for temperatures, um, that kind of thing. Checking all students before they come into the building, maybe even on the bus before they get onto the bus. Okay, why do we want to bring a sick child to school, or somebody that has a higher temperature than the normal, even if he's not sick, to school? Um, what are we going to do with these kids if they stay home, and parents go back to work? How's that gonna go? You know, Great if the kids are high school, but what if they're young? Um, one of the budgetary things, was we talked about cleaning. We talked about possibly having, like, honor society students help with cleaning. You know, Not a bad idea. They would have to be trained. They would have to get consent forms from their parents, things of that nature. Um, and the last thing that was glad it was brought up was the attendance policy would have to be changed if kids are going to be doing this kind of thing remotely, or even if they were to come back to school, there needs to be something changed in the attendance policy, because, I mean, with all this craziness going on, you know, um, it could definitely impact the student with their grades with the attendance policy. So that's all I have. But again, the meeting was very good. I did, share a lot of different ideas and problems that we face with the ideas. So left a lot of the parents, thinking, and hopefully with the next meeting we have even better solutions. Hopefully. Okay, Paul, I'm going to pass it over to you, and I'm going to mute myself. That's what we had.
Okay, I'm just going to add a little bit to Jim's stuff. And like every one of these discussions, we always come away with more questions than answers because we're waiting for guidance. I agree with everything that was said. The only additions I will make is some of the people had some really good suggestions about maybe we analyze each classroom individually. Maybe some classrooms require different masks than others. Not everybody's going to necessarily need the same mask. And because we have older buildings, when the state makes recommendations, we may not be able to meet some of those recommendations because of existing equipment restrictions. So we may have to get very creative with some of our fresh air solutions or air handling solutions or directional flow solutions, whatever the mandates are. So solutions might be very, very local to our school district, to our community, and some may be very, very local to specific classrooms. Music may, for Dan's classroom, may have some very, very different solutions for how we provide them with better airflow and better PPE for kids playing instruments than, say, a history classroom or other classrooms. So we're going to probably have to analyze each individual classroom for its specialized needs for PPE and requirements. Beyond that, I'm in agreement with everything Jim said, so I'll shut up.
Well, thank you both for facilitating, and thank you everyone in the health and safety room. Um, I'm sorry if I sent some folks to the wrong room, but I know we had a great conversation, and I'd like to move on. Jamie Didana is going to speak about the teaching and learning room and what was discussed.
Okay, well, we got a great discussion. Everybody participated. It was great to hear a lot of different sides from parents and elementary and high school and administrators. So some of the challenges we feel they're going to face in person is probably along the lines of what Jim was saying, but the spacing and social distancing, what's the density rules that are going to come down from the state, how many kids can be in a building. Ventilation is an issue with in-school teaching, personal hygiene, sharing of materials, screening students and teachers coming to the building, obviously transportation, in-school activities. What do? We have plays and basketball games, and how do we deal with that? Limiting people in the building. How do we deal with the cleanliness of the bathrooms and the passing times? Testing, state testing, are the students at the same level? How do we know when they're ready to move on? How are they, we know they're prepared? So really creating benchmarks to figure out where kids are. Retransitioning students back into the building, getting back into the routine. And a big one is teachers getting together to look at curriculum, do PD together so that they're prepared when the kids get here to begin teaching, and not cramming everything in 1 year into 10 months, but how do we reevaluate our curriculum and make sure we are teaching what we need to teach. Remote instruction, again, a lot of concerns, the structure of kids being at home, the procedures, the structure at home, how stable is the environment. Things online can't be done the same as they are in person, like the arts, the phys ed. 20 minutes of work in school may take a student 60 minutes to do that work at home because of the lack of maybe support or being able to get answers to questions right away. Recreating engaging curriculum for online instruction. I mean, what does that look like? What does good online instruction look like? What is scientifically based good instruction? We don't really know. Meeting in large groups is very difficult to engage all the students. Getting families on board, how crucial it is that they learn and not take the kid out shopping in the middle of the day because mom's got to run errands. And knowing that that kid has to be at school from 8 to 3 and be on a schedule. Access to the internet. I'm just kind of trying to paraphrase here. The attendance policy came up. Getting kids online when they need to be online. Again, that scheduling came up. A big one that we brought up was the relationship between kids and teachers, and how important that is to get kids moving from one, from progressing through the curriculum and progressing through the year and how important that is. The condition of the computers. When you use a computer every day for 4 or 5 hours a day, they wear down. You know, we have issues that, how do we deal with the tech when the kids' computers, and how fast can that turnaround be? And teaching kids to understand all the platforms that they're going to need to be able to use, whether music, phys ed, music. I mean, I know we use Teams, but inside of Teams, there are many, many different platforms that we use and teachers use, and getting kids familiar with all that, that takes time. Uh, for hybrid instruction, it seemed that some of the concerns were 6 to 7 classes seems to be way too many for kids, both in hybrid and in distance learning. It's not the same as being in school. How to schedule hybrid, how to schedule that in and out of school, who do you bring in and when do you bring them in? Teachers having to teach on many different platforms. So not only teaching at school, but then also having kids in remote learning and planning and being ready for that. And the reworking of the entire curriculum that came up over and over again. Some solutions we came up with: teachers being flexible, come in, work on curriculum and benchmark, maybe starting the school year with the kids a little later so that we can have PD at the beginning of the year, or get teachers in early to start working and collaborating with one another, creating those benchmarks. Surveying the parents, what do they want? What are some of the obstacles that the parents see? Are they going to send their kids back to school if we're open? That's very important to know. We talked about remote instruction, some of the creative solutions, you know, a 4-day work week so that teachers and students have a day not only for planning, but to catch up each week. Meeting in small groups for remote instruction. The large group seemed to not engage as many students as small group work did. Teachers working from the building if needed so that they had their materials right on hand and could readily use those materials. Rotating classes. We talked about this with remote and distance learning, maybe rotating classes, maybe not having 7 classes, but rotating classes in 3 to 4 week sections, time period, so that in this 4 weeks, you take these 4 classes so that they could really concentrate on those classes rather than being overwhelmed with 7 or 8 different subjects or classes they had to take. We felt that the Zoom meetings were beneficial. We heard from a parent that, you know, they actually liked it, and they actually felt that it was easy for the parents to stay engaged and see what was going on when they could observe their children in Zoom meetings, and kind of thought that was a good way for communication. Again, the hybrid instruction, some of the solutions was in kind of an A-B schedule, 2 days on, 2 days off, with deep cleaning in between on a Wednesday. So you'd bring one set of kids in on Monday, Tuesday, another set of kids in on Thursday, Friday, with deep cleaning, and catch up on Wednesday. And then some of the institutional, budgetary, and regulatory obstacles. The state really needs to kind of ease up on the attendance requirements, the days, the minutes that are required. They need to also ease up on the APPR requirements, because if the kids are at home, we're gonna have even less control. So NYSET and state ed and the governor are working together to really understand the realistic approach that was going to be taken next year. State funding for remote learning. I mean, the computers are not going to last forever. You know, we have to make sure that they're working, that the kids have them, that internet access is available and needs to be paid for if possible. And the varying requirements for the students. Is state testing required? Can we get rid of the regents? Can we get rid of the 3 through 8 testing, or at least make it optional for students to take if they don't feel they're ready for it. And one of the big things in the high school was limiting the student working hours. We found that a lot of kids worked as soon as we went out in March. A lot of the high school kids got jobs and then weren't available between 8 and 3 when classes were being taught by the teachers, or when the teachers were available for help. So the state really needs to say to businesses, nobody can work between 8 and 3. Those are school hours. And that's something else we felt that the governor had to come down and say. So that's the recap. It was a great discussion. We could have went on for days and days and days, but thank you for keeping it to an hour, and everybody really got to participate. And thank you to my group.
That's great. Thank you so much. Thank you for everybody in the teaching and learning team. And now we're going to move to Yvonne Waters, our Director of Special Education and Pupil Personnel Services, to summarize that conversation.
Well, that was a mouthful, Sue, right? Hello, everybody. Again, I reiterate what the last two reported, great group of people, a lot of discussion. Always, first and foremost, is health and safety of everybody. And it's hard to separate it from our little caveat. And I had to try and rein people in a little bit, but they did feel that those things really needed to be addressed before they could really make great suggestions or have great discussions about how to move forward creatively and justifiably so. We do operate special classes with some high needs kiddos that range with anything from sensory processing disorders to, to just your average reading disability kind of thing. So there's a lot of caveats there in how things would look. The enforcing of the social distancing between the kids, whether they were in kindergarten or even in high school, didn't seem to matter. It was going to be an issue either way. Other challenges, the proper use of the PPE, the availability of staff, perhaps, to meet some of the needs, in particular for our English language learners, where we are as heavily staffed in the population ranges elementary and secondary. So that was considered to be a challenge with in-person instruction. For remote instruction, the big one that comes up all the time is student participation and engagement. Comments of students not actually being seen on site, so the teachers could not see the physical child, but whatever icon or whatever they chose to have their personal meme or whatever that was, and not knowing if the student was actually on the other side of that screen. Modeling on through distance learning, and also, once again, not being able to see what the students are seeing type of thing. So tech issues that came up a lot. Another with the tech was students, maybe the iPads weren't the best thing for them to have. Had a grandparent point out that didn't work so great, and that they had to go to their laptop to get things to work properly. So taking a real close look at what type of IT we're giving them and those supports, including internet access, also came up, and making sure that everybody has equitable access to the internet and the proper devices. Students with special needs have challenges with technologies at times, others do not. It's a gamut. Some really respond to remote learning, others do not. In particular, students with attention deficit disorder and those types of things, attention to a screen can be extremely challenging. It always seemed when we got to the combined model that it was, well, it's a little bit of in-person and it's a little bit of remote. So they kind of crossed in the suggestions. As far as creative suggestions, there's, again, I go back to the feeling, the impression that I took away from it was people needed to know more with health and safety and what that would look like before they could come up with a really solid creative solution. But there was talk of, teachers being in district to teach out of their classrooms as opposed to from their homes. We all know we had to pack up our things, get out and leave, and thought we were only going to be gone maybe a couple of weeks. And so obviously people didn't have all of their materials, etc. And having that preparedness for that. Discussions of related service providers, that it was a designated space. They weren't moving around. And that brings me to the regulations. And there's no more regulations than there are in special ed and E&L. And the feds have not loosened their strings on us at all. And it does not give special ed the flexibility that it truly needs to meet the students' needs, no matter what platform we're on. And that includes in person. There are some things that are really challenging, even on a normal, what was our former normal, shall I say. So there needs to be a lot of flexibility there, very much like what Jamie was talking about with assessments, et cetera. There's a ton of assessments in special ed. There's a ton of assessments for ENLs, that whole gamut. So that's pretty much, I would say, that the encompasses the overall overarching subjects that were talked about by this particular group.
Well, thank you, Yvonne, and thank you to everyone on the team for special education and ELLs. And now we're going to move on to Beverly Marr, elementary principal, and she's going to talk to us about the social emotional learning team.
So it was a neat perspective to be able to have a student on with us today, in addition to a parent, and then of course our teachers and counselors. So that was a really nice perspective to share. I think the biggest thing to recognize as a challenge across all different type of instructional formats is all of our kids and families are coming with different perspectives. And it's kind of like they come with varying levels of resilience, which we may see new from what we used to know of them, based upon changing economic challenges or different hardships that they may have gone through. And so despite whether we're here or we're remote, I think we have to recognize that perhaps the kid we knew may not be the kid that we get back. And I think that's important to keep in mind when we meet them again. Regarding in-person instruction, we have to consider that we need to, across all grades, think about SEL curriculum and how we're integrating that into our own curriculum. And really be more purposeful in that matter is a challenge for us. And also, again, across all instructional levels, there must be more routine. And I think the more routine we can set for the kids creates less anxiety for the families, the child, and the teachers as well. So that piece of routine and scheduling is a big piece of it, despite whether they're remote or they're in person. If we are remote, we do want to keep in mind the loss of socialization for our students, and also for our teachers and staff too, right? That socialization is a key. It's how we learn, as our speaker talked about prior to us going into our breakouts. And we have to be really mindful of how we work on that with our kids and what opportunities we can provide for them for that. It's just that lack of consistency also among teachers and among grades can cause anxiety for the families. So again, working on more structure and more consistency would be better there. There's the big issue of stress for families where they have the conflict over helping educate their child and having to work, whether they're working in the house or they're having to work remotely. It's a big stressor for families, and that's a big real problem that we've got to figure out how to contend with. Connection for the teacher and the student, it did come up from a parent that it does need to be on a more consistent basis, that a daily connection, daily touch needs to be happening for our kids so that they can keep and maintain those relationships as well. As far as examples for some solutions, getting a schedule out to our community and to our families, despite whether we're remote learning or whether we're in-house or hybrid, would be very helpful so families can plan and can better understand what to expect and how to figure out their week ahead. Also, to providing any kind of forums or resources for families and for teachers to be able to chat and to be able to kind of share time with each other. And also for the elementary, it's a little bit harder, but how do we connect our kids socially? If the school can figure out a way to do that through some of the Seesaw platforms or anything else they're using, Microsoft Teams, that would be really helpful as well. And as far as remote, if we are remote, how do we get movement classes worked into their instruction? And maybe think of more mindfulness type of movement versus maybe a traditional PE situation, and get kids moving mindfully either through yoga. It could be something that they do collaboratively with their family as well. Also, if we are hybrid, maybe the use of the ABC days to work our schedule, because kids are familiar with that concept, to give some kind of normalcy to it, might help us with the hybrid scheduling. Obstacles that we had are budget shortfalls, obviously, for social emotional. Obviously, we will be having a higher demand on our social emotional counseling needs, and we may have yet less resources for that. So how do we, as a community, support the kids and the families socially and emotionally with less monies? And the one thing that we didn't really touch on is we have to be cautious about economic changes with our families, and what may their family economics picture look like in August moving forward for some families as things begin to shake out and change yet again. And that's it. It was a great conversation.
Great. I wish to thank everyone that was in the social emotional learning team. And now we're going to move on to Dina Bizzaro, who facilitated the operations team, which was focused primarily on food service and transportation.
Thank you to everyone who participated in the operations breakout group. Some of the items that we discussed would be Germantown considering to become a nut-free school. The American Academy of Pediatrics has guidance on allergies for children. We also discussed segregating the children that do have allergies, particularly food allergies. New York State needs to be flexible with their requirements. And we talked about considering seating siblings together on a bus or in the cafeteria. We also talked about when kids are dropped off in the morning, where will they wait for school to start? So we had very good discussions, and I'd just like to thank everyone.
Okay, and then the last team I facilitated, but not really, because I ran in and out of that room several times. So I want to thank the team. We had a lot of great discussion. I made some notes, but I will also invite them to jump in case I miss something important. Thankfully, it's all being recorded. Our team, this is the digital equity and access team. We started out being debriefed regarding what happened in March when we so suddenly were shut down, and how some of the things that happened. I know our counseling team worked together to ensure that students that went home without devices were able to come and get them, or the devices were brought to them, and then identifying which families had no internet access, either cell phone hotspots or actual internet provider services, and what was done to help those families, and how we identified who those families were. So that was very helpful for the team to hear about, because that will obviously be ongoing if we're in a remote or a hybrid situation. And then we talked a little bit about some of the things that happened that we can learn from and be more prepared for in case we're in those situations again. Some of them are little, some of them are big. One example is having codes and passwords consistent, especially for the youngest children, when the family may have several children trying to juggle which codes and passwords for which child and which grade. Identifying user experience and the comfort level with technology, not only for the students, but also for the families and or caregivers who are really the boots on the ground helping the children engage in the lessons, the digital learning lessons. Time of day is really important, and I heard other groups talking about this too. sometimes the parents aren't home during the day, but the parents are home in the evening. There was a big conversation. Many times we were led to talking about pre-recorded lessons versus live stream lessons, the use of flipped classroom, and that would be for the models of hybrid or all online learning. There were some positives cited from our previous experience. Some educators felt they got to know their kiddos way better now that they saw the fort in the backyard, and they know that the dog's name is Wendy, and they know way more about the students, and probably in the other direction as well. The need for a space in the home. So for hybrid or blended or online learning, just having that space in the home where focusing is a little bit easier. We talked a lot about platforms. So every single child has an iPad, and every single child has Microsoft Office capability. And there are many, many platforms, and there may be a need to take a new look at that and find some standard platforms. And Apple Classroom, it was brought up. I don't even know if anybody's using it, but it does seem to be a tool that could be used that would be very similar to a high school schedule, where the student would go online, and when the period ends, they would go to the next period, and it would all be automated. They wouldn't have to come out of Teams and log into a different team. So that sounds like something that we should be taking a look at. You know, and then looking at those facilitators, pretty much everything we focused on was either the hybrid model or the online learning model, because even though there are obviously technology considerations for the 100% in the building model, they were far less than the ones for the other two. Maybe the parent who's facilitated a child in this spring is now going back to work, and maybe children are now in daycares. Are daycare centers having a Zoom room or having a Teams room, and are they now the facilitators for the younger children? Our network, we have a great infrastructure here at Germantown, but we have to be aware of its capabilities and its limitations. We also discussed briefly having teachers teaching from their rooms if we're in an at-home model or a hybrid model, because, and certainly they can't all stream at once, but we could do some experiments. We could set some scenarios up with the use of flipped classroom, which means you would record a lesson, and the student would then play the lesson and then meet in small groups. That also came up in another room. Have small groups to work with the teacher afterwards. So it's kind of like you see the pre-recorded lesson, and then there's appointment times, almost like an office hours thing, where teachers engage with smaller groups of students. Best practices for distance learning. Somebody noted that University of Phoenix has been doing this for 20 years. They probably invented a bit of a wheel. Hudson Valley Community College, apparently, granted these are for higher level aged learners, but there could be some things that we could use. Another thing was some professional development, I call it, for parents, but having that available. And I heard another team talk about having maybe discussion groups for parents too, so they can support one another, but certainly to help our parents who have less of a comfort level with the products that we're using or the platforms that we're using. And several times platform consistency was identified. For flipped classroom, Tech Valley High is actually the model in our region, and we have a great relationship with them, and maybe reaching out and taking some more advantage of some training for our teachers. And then the fact that we could go from any one of the 3 models, and hybrid, of course, being possibly 5 more models, because it could vary, but being prepared to go from one model to another. So maybe students take their devices home every night if we're fortunate enough to be here in the building. And then there's a small thing, but I thought it was worth mentioning, UV lights for disinfecting of devices, because if they're going to go home every night, some of them will not come back the next day. It will just happen. But to have, apparently there's charging carts with the UV lights in them for the loaner devices that we may need to use. And there was really kind of more, a lot of talk about the hybrid model and what that might look like. And also the combination of pre-recorded and live instruction, and to look at curriculum, identify what can be pre-recorded, what is the best model for a skill or a concept or a topic being taught, and then working together, teachers working together to prepare that instruction. We were given, and it's in the chat room, a place to go, www.blendedlearning.org/models. Has some great information about many of the things we discussed. And I had mentioned the idea about maybe rehearsing some of this and running it so that our network engineers can take a look at the bandwidth that's needed to provide the different types of models, and also what it would look like with, for example, half of the students in the building and half not in the building. So I do invite anybody on the digital equity and access if you want to add to that, because as I said, I was out of the room trying to let folks in a couple of times. Did anybody want to jump in? Okay, so it is 7 minutes before 1 or 2. And at this point in time, we have everything recorded. We are going to make an attempt. It'll probably take us a few days to put it in a format probably very similar to the one on the New York State Ed website, so that folks can see what we talked about today. July 13th is the date where the Board of Regents will hear from all of the task force teams, and we anticipate getting some kind of guidance soon after. The guidance will come with a deadline for us to submit our own plans. So there's definitely, we have gotten a great start. I know I really kind of wanted to be in every single room because I wanted to hear everything, but by recording it, we can share it with our entire greater community. And I really want to thank you for giving up 3 hours in the middle of a day to participate. I would love to hear from you. If you have any ideas of how our communication in these teams could have been improved, please just feel free to drop me an email. I'm sure I can speak to all the facilitators. If you have any kind of constructive feedback, we would love to hear from you. And I want to thank everybody and wish you all the best. Stay safe, and thanks again.
All right, thank you.
Here. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.